Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is going to be titled, Do Not Go with the Flow and Go with Your Own Flow. There's a saying that's deeply embedded in American life, a phrase you'll hear in casual conversation, in workplaces, and even in advice from friends and family. That saying is, go with the flow. On the surface, it sounds harmless. It's meant to encourage relaxation, to avoid unnecessary resistance, and to blend in rather than stand out. The implied message is, don't be difficult, don't draw attention to yourself, and don't think too differently from those around you. I'll admit, there are times when going with the flow can be useful. In certain situations, especially when you're trying to avoid conflict or unnecessary attention, it can be a strategic choice. For example, if you're in an unfamiliar environment and you need to quietly observe before acting, blending in can be wise. But here's the problem. The phrase is often treated as a universal truth, when in reality, it can be dangerous. Let's use a metaphor. Imagine you're a fish swimming in the ocean looking for food. Another fish tells you, go with the flow. Follow the others. They'll lead you to food. It sounds reasonable until you realize you have no idea where that flow is headed. It could lead you straight into a fisherman's net. It could carry you toward a waterfall where you plunge to your death. It could take you into waters where predators are waiting. The point is simple. Blindly following the current or the crowd can lead you into danger. When people use go with the flow as blanket advice, they often strip away the need for critical thinking. It becomes a subtle way of saying, don't question. Just follow, and we live in a society where questioning is often discouraged. In fact, it's not just that we're told not to answer certain questions, we're told not to ask them in the first place. That's why I appreciated something I learned during orientation for a job I once had. They drilled into us the idea that questions equal knowledge, and knowledge equals power. The more questions you ask, the more information you gain. And the more information you have, the better equipped you are to make decisions. That's why I've never understood the phrase TMI, too much information. To me, there's no such thing. If you're trying to learn, there's no limit to how much information you should want. But that's a tangent. Let's return to the main point. We live in a culture that often discourages coloring outside the lines. We're taught to obey, to do what we're told, and to avoid challenging the status quo. That's where go with the flow fits in. It's a social lubricant for conformity. Parents pass it down to children. Friends repeat it to each other. If you're at a party and everyone's doing something questionable, someone might say, just go with the flow. But what if going with the flow at that party means doing cocaine or other illegal drugs? What if it means engaging in behavior that could land you in jail or cause serious harm? That's why I believe in a different approach. Go with your own flow. Your flow is the path you've chosen based on your values, your goals, and your judgment. Following someone else's flow means surrendering control over where you end up. I've seen this play out in education. Some people go to college simply because all their friends are going. They don't stop to ask if it's the right choice for them. They just follow the educational current. They fear standing out. They fear being labeled as different. This is conformity disguised as normalcy. And it's why the phrase go with the flow can be so misleading. It sounds innocent, even relaxing, but it can be a trap. It reminds me of the way George Carlin approached language. Carlin loved to dissect everyday sayings and expose their flaws. I remember in one of his audiobooks, he questioned why people say overseas when traveling from New York to London. There's only one sea between them, so why the plural? It's a small example, but it illustrates the point. We rarely stop to question the words and phrases we use. Carlin's philosophy was simple. Question everything. Question what you see, what you hear, and what you're told. He urged people to question authority itself. I like to think I'm carrying on that legacy. Because once you start questioning, you begin to see how much of our language and our thinking is built on autopilot. And when you stop going with the flow, you'll notice something else: resistance. People will react negatively when you refuse to follow the current. They'll be shocked, even offended, that you're not conforming. This reminds me of an interview I once heard with a Russian heavy metal artist named Alexander. He grew up in Russia but now lives in Florida. He described Russian society as one where you're expected to color inside the lines, never question authority, and live an average, unremarkable life. You're not supposed to stand out or be different. He contrasted that with the American ideal, the belief that you're special and can do anything you want. But he also pointed out that parts of American society are just like Russia. In many places, you're still expected to follow the same path: go to college, get a normal job, and avoid rocking the boat. The truth is, American culture isn't monolithic. It varies by state, by community, and by family background. If you grow up in an Asian American household, college might be a given. If you grow up in a low-income neighborhood where survival is the priority, college might not even be on the table. Economic reality shapes the flow you're expected to follow. And that's why questioning the flow is so important, because not all flows lead to the same destination. Before I wrap up, I want to touch on another phrase that bothers me: kill two birds with one stone. It's meant to describe doing two things at once to save time, but it's unnecessarily violent. Who is out here killing birds with stones in the modern world? It's a primitive image, likely dating back to a time when that was a real hunting method. Today, most birds aren't killed that way, and more importantly, why should efficiency be expressed through animal harm? We could easily come up with a kinder, more creative phrase to express the same idea, but people don't question it. They repeat it without thinking because it's normal. And that's the larger point. So much of what we say and do is unexamined. We accept phrases, traditions, and behaviors simply because they have been passed down. But if we want to live intentionally and avoid dangerous currents, we have to stop, think, and sometimes swim against the flow. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Moors October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye for now.